Hi, and thank you for joining this episode of Security Code. In this episode, I'm going to be trying to analyze what the jihadis who carried out the recent blast in Delhi were actually trying to achieve. A subject that's cloaked in mystery, but really shouldn't be. We've confronted these kinds of cases before in India and the rest of the world, and I'll be unpacking some of the motives that drive these killers. Fire cloaked his body as Kafil Ahmed danced towards the hydrogen peroxide cylinders loaded in the boot of his Jeep Cherokee. This final macabre sacrifice he perhaps hoped would work where science and his prayers had both failed. A highly regarded PhD in computational fluid dynamics, Kafil had designed detonators using mobile phones wired to light bulbs surrounded by match heads. The detonators, though, failed to generate enough energy to set off the hydrogen peroxide fuel mix. Kafil had won his race against the British intelligence service MI5 and got his car to Glasgow airport, only to lose it all to a quirk of fate or voltage. Ever since Monday's bombing in Delhi, the largest strike in India since the 2006 Mumbai train bombings, if you measure it by the volume of explosives used, there has been bewilderment over why the perpetrators, highly educated, professionally successful individuals, many of them doctors, would seek to engage in mass killing. The first thing we need to put aside is that question itself. Education has nothing to do with the radicalization or beliefs of individuals. Remember, Al Qaeda's co founder, Ayman al Zawahiri, was a doctor in Cairo. So was Jalis Ansari, who staged a series of bombings in 1993 to avenge the demolition of the Babri Masjid. Doctors have participated in the unfolding story of the global jihad. In fact, Bilal Abdullah, Kafil's associate in Glasgow, was a doctor. Engineers, most famous among them Osama bin Laden, are significantly overrepresented in jihadist movements, scholar Diego Gambetta and Stefan Hertog have shown. For the most part, see Christine Fair has recorded, terrorists, I quote, tend to be better educated relative to the communities from which they are recruited. Perhaps that's because more educated people ask more questions and are more prone to thinking that they should do something about perceived or real grievances. The real lesson from the Delhi bombings has been elided over, though. For the more than 3 decades of the Kashmir Jihad, there have actually been surprisingly few significant attempts to attack the Indian state in its heartland by Kashmir jihadis. You had the 2001 Indian Parliament attack, the 2008 Mumbai attacks, and the strike on the Pathankot Air Force Base in 2016. Each of those attacks involved foreign jihadists from Pakistan, with ethnic Kashmiris or locals playing minor roles or none at all. The most lethal terrorist attacks we've had in India, like the 1993 other 1993 bombings in Mumbai carried out by the Dawood Ibrahim group, or the 7/7 train bombing in Mumbai, involved Indian jihadists from states other than Kashmir, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, elsewhere. This should point us towards a dangerous process unfolding in Kashmir. A new generation of jihadists is just starting to emerge, convinced that the keys to the secession of Kashmir lie in inflicting pain on the heartland, not battling the Indian army in the streets of Srinagar or the forests of the Pir Panjal. 25 years ago, standing on a stage erected just a few hundred meters from the Inter-Service Intelligence Directorate's headquarters in Islamabad, the Lashkar-e-Taiba chief Hafiz Muhammad Saeed vowed, I quote, to fly the flag of Islam over the Red Fort. The polemic pointed to a grim reality. Even though jihadist groups had escalated violence to record levels after the Kargil war, their battle of attrition with Indian forces was leading nowhere. To succeed in Kashmir, jihad commanders argued other Indian cities and industries would have to be hit. For years, inter-services intelligence commanders had discussed much the same idea. In 1992, Unsuccessful efforts had been made to link Khalistan terrorists with the logistics of groups in Kashmir so as to widen the theatre of conflict. Then the Jammu and Kashmir Islamic Front, set up specifically for operations outside Kashmir, met with the 1993 bomber and gang world figure Abdul Razak Tiger Memon in 1995 to discuss what was possible. And Hizbul Mujahideen commander Ali Muhammad Dar had sketched out the same idea in his private diaries, which were recovered by police after he was shot dead in 1996. Lashkar commanders unleashed operatives in cities like Hyderabad from 1996, succeeding in staging many bombings relatively minor in comparison with, say, what happened in Bombay. The strategy, however, proved to be a high risk one, with the arrest of Pakistani nationals exposing the country to embarrassment in the West consistently. Foreigners also found it very difficult to operate in this new Indian milieu they were put into. Then, in 2001, a small group of one time activists of the Students' Movement of India set up a study circle called Al Isaba, literally a group in search of the truth, in Bhatkal, charming seaside town in Karnataka. Led by the cleric Muhammad Siish, the group affiliated itself with other cells linked to the Lashkar e Taiba. Lashkar trained jihadis like Sadiq Israr Sheikh and Atif Amin from Uttar Pradesh had gone for training after the Gujarat communal violence, to learn how to make bombs in the hope of staging a revenge war. This network would eventually coalesce into what we call the Indian Mujahideen, which was the most deadly terrorist network ever to operate in our country, other than arguably the Maoists, but the Maoists never targeted civilians on a large scale in urban centers. Even though the Indian Mujahideen was broken up by Indian intelligence and police investigators eventually, a new Al Qaeda grouping sprang up in Afghanistan, led by the Deoband educated Indian jihadist Sanaul Haq. Indian jihadists from Kerala and Karnataka also joined Islamic State units in Afghanistan. In Kashmir itself, a new generation of jihadists drew lessons from the Indian Mujahideen story. From 2008, the state had seen a series of popular mobilizations against India, which culminated in a bloody uprising 8 years later. For all practical purposes, the government of India was swept out of southern Kashmir in 2016. Yet, 3 years later, New Delhi had reasserted its authority, crushing Islamist networks and jihadist groups. Following these events, the jihadist Zakir Bhatt, a college dropout from Chandigarh, sought to create a kind of Al Qaeda affiliated organization in Kashmir, free of ties with the inter services intelligence and traditional jihadist groups. To Bhatt, it seemed that such an independent group would be free to hit India at will, having no pressure by the inter services intelligence need to avert war or avert exposure in the West. Little attention was paid when Jaish-e-Mohammed posters, crudely printed on an inkjet without the organization's logo, began appearing in the Srinagar suburb of Nogam in the middle of last month. Police investigators, though, soon linked the poster pasters to Irfan Ahmad, a cleric educated at various seminaries in the Kashmir Valley and a sixth standard dropout. According to the police, Irfan Ahmad set up an Islamist study circle which became popular with a set of doctors who were themselves drawn to his ideology. At the center of the group's discussions was what kind of jihad was needed to liberate Kashmir. The answers, 2611 National Investigations Agency detective Sajid Shappu has written in a stellar essay on this topic, can be found in a set of 6 works. In these 6 works, the Hyderabad-born Islamist theologian Abdul Alim Islahi explored what it meant to be an Indian in an India that, in his view, was drifting towards Hindu nationalist totalitarianism. Alim's book circulated extensively among young Muslims attracted to jihadism who were seeking a political vocabulary rooted in their faith. 18th century theological debate actually framed these discussions long before Alim's time. Shah Waliullah Dehlavi, an 18th century theologian, argued against the metropolitan syncretism of Mughal India. To him, it seemed imperative that Muslim rulers strengthen communal boundaries by immersing young people in Arab culture and conducting jihad against not Muslims, not like the Mughals seeking accommodation with their milieu. The Waliullah project, though, collapsed after the fall of the Mughal Empire in 1857. Shah Waliullah's son, Shah Aziz, declared that India was Dar ul Harb, a state where Islam was at a state of war. Even though Muslims could practice their faith in India, he argued, the loss of Islamic sovereignty by itself subjugated followers of the religion. From the 1920s, tens of thousands of Indian Muslims marched towards Afghanistan in an act called Hijrat, modeled on the exile of the Prophet Muhammad himself from Mecca to Medina. Fueled by theologians Qayamuddin Abdul Bari and Abdul Kalam Azad, the movement had a tragic end. The migrants leaving India for Afghanistan were often robbed and killed on their hazardous journey across the Khyber Pass. Large numbers of self-described jihadist rebellions against the British also broke out though, from conflagrations in the Afghan borderlands to rebellions in Bihar. The rise of independent India led important theologians to declare that the country was neither Darul Harb, at war with Islam, nor Darul Islam, that is, a Muslim land. They designated India instead as a Darul Aman, or land of peace, where the rights of Muslims were guaranteed through citizenship. This theological formulation led the Darul Ulum Seminary at Deoband and political groups like the Jamaat Ulema Hind to make their peace with the new secular republic. After the demolition of the Babri Masjid, Abdul Alim Islahi broke with this consensus. India was a Darul Kafar, he asserted, or land of disbelievers. According to him, non-Muslim Indians were, I quote, actually planning to annihilate the Muslims of the country. He claimed, I quote again, wanton attacks on Muslims are routine and the dignity of their women is violated. For this kind of language, Alim was expelled from the party to which he'd given his life, the Jamaat-e-Islami. But he was embraced by the young jihadists who were beginning to form the Indian Mujahideen. Failing in their efforts to travel to Afghanistan through Turkey, the doctors of Irfan's study circle began plotting bomb attacks at home. Remember, exile proving impossible, war was the only choice they thought they were left with. Their plans are marked by remarkable ambition. The thousands of kilograms of ammonium nitrate that police say they have found from these groups would have been enough to devastate entire buildings. Lack of movement on building a genuine democratic culture after 2019 is helping the region's jihadists. Large numbers of young people who should be involved in the polity, in politics, in public life have retreated into the twin prisms of extreme religiosity on the one hand or drugs on the other. They feel they have no hope of exercising any meaningful agency over their lives or bringing about any useful changes in society. The principal engagement between young Kashmiris and the Indian state remains the military checkpost. Even though growing numbers of ethnic Kashmiris are finding work across India, like the members of the Doctors' Terror Cell, the country's climate of anti-Muslim chauvinism pushes them into communal ghettos, marginalized from the mainstream. Kashmir's police and its intelligence services deserve some real credit for saving India, the city of Delhi, from the murderous fallout of the multiple bombings the cell seems to have been planning. The real challenge ahead, however, is to choke the political space that has been ceded to jihadism. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.